Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to be with you again. And I want to tell you about my friend Marcus. Marcus and I, we go way back. 10 years ago, Marcus went to Vegas. And I don't know if you guys have ever been to Vegas before, but he had never been. He went with his wife. And he didn't really know what to expect, but he heard about, the slot machines. He heard about the all-you-can-eat buffets and the shows and the shopping, all that stuff. But all Marcus cared about was blackjack. He had been practicing his blackjack skills. In fact, he'd been practicing his card counting skills. If you've ever seen the movie 21, it's not technically illegal, but it's kind of frowned upon. But Marcus had been practicing to play $5 at the $5 table in the Monte Carlo. And so he went, when the time came, he went with his wife, and he's there. And the first night, they went out to dinner, but then he told his wife, "Hey, I just want to go play at the table." She's like, "Yeah, sure, that's fine." So he sat down and started with $5, multiplied it to $20, to $100, to $200, and the card counting skills were starting to pay off, and he was getting pretty good at it. But after, 4 hours, his wife was like, can we go to bed? It was like 11, 12 o'clock. So they went to bed. Next morning, they went to the all-you-can-eat buffet for breakfast. And, they went shopping. They did all the touristy things. But all Marcus could think about was going back to that table, right? And we're talking about the content life. We're talking about finances and all that stuff. And he was not content with the $200 that he won. He wanted more. And he had this desire to multiply that. So he said, "Hey, can we go back to the table?" She's like, "Yeah, okay." He's like, "I'll just play a couple hands, right?" So he's there at the table, and after 6 hours, he was sacrificing his marriage for a couple $100 and the smug sense of pride that he was going to take down this casino with his card counting skills. And so he continued to play. So it was about 3 a.m. when his wife said, "Honey, I didn't come to Vegas to watch you play blackjack. This is a waste of my trip. I'm going to bed." And I don't remember what he said next. I just remember that he snapped at her in front of the whole table. And, there's just this silence at the table. And all I remember what was told to me was what his wife said back to him, which was, "Honey, I don't know who this person is, but I'm going to bed, and why don't you come to bed when you become yourself again, because I don't know who that person is." See, I was there with Marcus. In fact, I am Marcus. Marcus is what we've dubbed as my alter ego when, yeah, that was 10 years ago, okay? Marcus has come a long way. God bless Kendall, my wife, right? But isn't that, you can laugh, you can judge me all you want, but there's a Marcus inside of you. There's a Marcus inside of all of us that wants more. It wants more. It isn't content with just this much, but we have to have a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And that's what we're talking about today. Is just throughout the series, is just contentment. How do we have contentment with what we have instead of this desire for more and more and more? And the verse we read last week really kind of is the theme verse of this whole series. "I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty at the blackjack table or in want of losing it all at the blackjack table." No. I have learned the secret of being content. That's what we're talking about. What is this secret of contentment? And last week we said that true contentment rests in the devotion to God, not gold. And we looked at this verse of being in want and in plenty. And last week we looked at to be in want of more, to be desiring more. And we said that we need to have devotion not to wanting more gold, but more of God, and to pursue him. That love of money, not money, but the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And so it's not wrong to have money, but it's wrong to want and desire and have this craving for more and more and more. So last week we looked at what it is to be content in want. Today we're going to look at what does it mean to have contentment in plenty. How do you have contentment when you have enough? And you have the temptations of having riches. And so this is the question for us today is how can you have your riches without your riches having you? How can you have your riches and have your cars and have your vacations without those things having a grip on you? And today we're going to be in this verse, the same chapter, the same part of the Bible we read last week, a letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to his kind of mentee in the faith, Timothy. We're going to be in 1 Timothy 6, 17 through 19. And you can scan this QR code to be brought to the YouVersion Bible app and a whole kind of plan where you can see some of the sermon notes that I've provided for you today. If you've got your physical Bibles, feel free to open to that. If you don't have a physical Bible, as we always say, we've got them for free out in the lobby. Just go and take one. That is a gift from us to you. We want you to have that. But today, this is where we're going to be. And Paul is writing this from a prison cell, around the same time he wrote the verse we just read in Philippians, where he says, I've learned the secret of being content in prison, right? And he's saying, yes, you can have contentment in prison. You can have contentment when you have a lot of things as well. And so just a question for us today is how many of you, show of hands, would consider yourself rich? A couple of people raised their hands. I think maybe we're broadening the definition of being rich, right? To say I'm rich in family, I'm rich in all. What if I were to tell you that most of us in this room were financially rich? Now we're going to get into that in a minute, but when you consider the billionaires in the U.S., it makes sense that we're one of the richest countries in the world. Right? Billionaires, let's just look at some statistics that there are 2,668 billionaires in the world. 735 of them are Americans, which means that we have 27.5% of the world's billionaires here in our country. Now, of the net worth of those billionaires, the next stat is of U.S. billionaires, there's $4.7 trillion that they have. Now, the total wealth of world billionaires is $12.7 trillion, meaning the U.S. has 37% of the net worth of billionaires here in the U.S. And 8 of the top 10 billionaires of the world are Americans. So we've got a lot of billionaires in our world, or in our country. A lot of very, very rich people. Now, I want you to think through your own household income right now. And just take a moment to kind of just think through, okay, our household income, maybe it's just you're a single parent. Maybe you've got how many dependents you have. You can put in all those things in your head and kind of keep that information. We're getting ready for tax time, right? It's coming up next year. But think about those things. Now, there's a website I want to tell you about called givingwhatwecan.org. And if you go to this website, I actually got a QR code here that'll, if you scan that, you can put in all of that information of your household income. But here's what I want to share with you, is that from this website, if you make, now this is for single income with no kids, right? Now, if it changes things when you add kids, but $10,000 a year. If you make $10,000 a year with one income, you're in the top 80% of the world's riches. 80%. Now, if you make $20,000, you're in the top 90th percentile, 90%. If you make $40,000, you are in the top 97% of the world. And if you make $80,000, you're in the top 99% of the world. That's radical. If you you can put in all of your statistics, all of your giving, or not giving, all of your income data and your children and dependents and all that stuff. But most of us, I think probably many of us are in at least this category, meaning that we are richer than we realize. We are richer than we realize. We have more wealth than we know what to do with sometimes. And listen, this is not meant to minimize anyone's financial hardships. I know that all of us are at different places in this room. Some of us were struggling to make ends meet. We're working 2 to 3 jobs just to be able to afford the cost of living today. I'm not trying to minimize that pain. I'm trying to just shift our perspective to realize that in the grand scheme of the global economy, we have been given so much. If you have a car, you're in the top percentage of the world. If you have, food on your table, if you have a house over, a roof over your head, you are blessed. And so what do you do with that? How do you steward that in a way? How do you have your riches without your riches having you? I want to pass around this bill right here. I'm going to start with you guys. Just pass it around. And that is a $5 Colombian pesos bill. All right, 5 Colombian pesos. We're going to pass that around the whole room. And just a guess of how much, without Googling it, what's the exchange rate? How much do you think that is worth in US dollars? Throw out some figures. 10 cents. He's Googling right now. I see your phone out. How much? $1.50. So we got 10 cents, $1.50. 50 cents. 2 cents. A penny. All right, you ready? I'm gonna show it to you. You can keep passing that around, okay? Because it's really worthless to me. Because this is how much it's worth, which is 1/10 of a US penny. That $5 bill, now that's not even the smallest denomination that Colombian pesos have. They have coins that it goes smaller and smaller. And that is kind of valuable because that was one of my kids' souvenirs that I brought back, the cheapest souvenir I've ever got. So, but I will need that back at the end. But isn't that crazy? That just rattled my mind. Like I couldn't believe that was worth 1/10 of a US penny. My dad and I recently went to Colombia. That's where I got that from. We took a trip to Colombia and we went with Compassion International, which is an organization that really releases children from poverty in Jesus' name. And we got to go to this household for this girl here. And we went into her house and there was just a tin roof with holes in the ceiling. And this was another place that we went, so in that house, every time that it rained, they had to get buckets out and catch the water. This is another place where you just see people's homes are just like completely washed away with water. And we got a chance to go into these homes and go into these villages and see the poverty. If you've ever been on a missions trip, you know how wealthy we are, how much we have compared to the rest of the world when you see what's going on overseas in places like Colombia and places like Dominican Republic, places like Honduras and Ecuador and places like that. That we are richer than we realize. And we are getting richer than we realize. You are getting richer than you realize. In fact, the greatest transfer of wealth in history is about to happen. They say in the next 20 to 30 years, we're going to witness the greatest transfer of wealth in history because $83.5 trillion is going to be passed from boomer generation down to Gen X and Gen Y, the millennial generation. That's what's going to happen over the next 20 to 30 years. As boomers retire or as they pass away, they're going to be passing on this to the next generation, which accounts to $1.2 million of transferable wealth per person. It's the greatest transfer of wealth in the history that we've ever experienced. Maybe some of you are like, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen for me. But we are getting richer. We have more riches than we realize a lot of times. And so, question is, how can you have your riches without your riches having you? I know that we're all in different places. I know that some of us would consider ourselves very wealthy. So others would say, I'm not rich at all. But what I want us to do is to lift our perspective a little bit to see that we have been given so much. And what do we do with what we've been given? How do we live in a way that we steward the wealth that we have and the riches that we have in a way that honors God and leads us into the content life, the life that Jesus wants for us? And if you and I don't practice the principles that we're going to read today in this passage, we're going to constantly play out the Marcus scenario in our lives where we just want a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and not being content with what we already have. And we're going to continue to just chase after the wind as Solomon puts it in the Old Testament. And so today we're going to dive into this passage in 1 Timothy chapter 6, starting in verse 17. He says, Paul's writing to Timothy. He says, command those who are rich in this present world. Oh, thank you. I am rich. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant. Command those who are rich in this present world, which is many of us in this room, many of us in this church, many of us in America, to not be arrogant. Some of you are like, I could never be arrogant because I don't have enough. But there's many of us that when we allow riches to be the center of our lives, we start to compare ourselves with other people. We start to value people based off of how many figures they're making. And let me just share an example of this. Last time you went to your high school reunion, like you found out, okay, that person, they've been in job after job after job. They can't seem to hold a job down. Oh, they must not they must not matter very much, right? We wouldn't say that out loud, but you want to talk to the person in the room who's like making six figures. You want to talk to the person who's, they started their own business and they're doing awesome, right? We start to become arrogant in viewing others and valuing others according to how much they're making versus seeing people that they're created in the image of God, that everyone has value, everyone has worth. We start to value people that way. We start to compare ourselves with what we see on Facebook and Instagram, the fancy vacations that they took. Oh man, we got to go on that. We got to keep up with the Joneses. We got to get the nicer car, the nicer house. We got to do the house renovations because it looks like it's from the 80s. We can't have that going on here. So we've got to upgrade and update our situation. And we just do that, right? To keep up with the Joneses. We start to become blind to the needs of others around us when we become arrogant. And here's the reality is that when we do that, we are making money our identity, and wealth makes a poor identity. It makes a poor identity. If you allow your wealth to dictate who you are and your value and your sense of worth in this world, I'm going to tell you in a minute why that is not a good identity. But Paul goes on, he says, not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth. Don't put your hope in money and in wealth, because in doing that, you're making wealth your security, and wealth makes a poor security. It makes a poor foundation to build your life off of. When you have no hope and we turn to money, many of us, myself included, start to fall into this trap of believing that we can buy happiness. We can buy our way out of problems. We can just throw some money at a problem and it'll just fix our lives. So you're stressed? Well, go to Target for some retail therapy, right? You're anxious. Rather than praying and bringing that anxiety to God, I mean, how many of us just go to Amazon on our phone and just shop? Like, what am I even shopping for? I don't even know, but just to distract myself from my anxiety, I'm going to go to Amazon. I'm going to distract myself. I start to put our hope in wealth, thinking that if I buy that next gadget, oh, Black Friday's coming up. Oh boy, the deals are coming up, right? We start to get excited. We put our hope in wealth. You feel unappreciated at work, feel like nobody values you. So what do you got to do? You got to treat yourself. Treat yourself, if you ever watch Parks and Rec. But treat yourself. You just go out, go out to the salon, go out and, do yourself up, whatever it is, get the fancy car, like upgrade your wardrobe. You don't feel good about yourself, get a better car, upgrade your life. Get a new phone, right? The iPhone 16, you got to get that one because the 15's old. So you got to get the new phone, right? And we have to upgrade our lives. Or your marriage is struggling, and rather than going to counseling, rather than talking through your issues, you know what you need? Another vacation. Just get away. Just go on a fancy vacation. That's going to fix all of your problems. Nobody's laughing in this room. I feel like I'm stepping on toes. Stepping on my own toes. So the reality is that there's a Marcus inside of you. There's a Marcus inside of me that wants to put our hope in wealth and put our hope in the next thing that we can fill and buy our lives and fill it with happiness. But wealth makes a poor security, because when we put our hope in wealth, we're not just making it a security, a secure foundation, we're making it a deity, and wealth makes a poor deity. Wealth makes a terrible God. It makes a terrible God. And you know why? Why does wealth make a terrible God, a terrible hope, a terrible identity, and an arrogant life that we have? It's because he says it is so uncertain. You and I know this. We know wealth and money is so uncertain. You look at the housing market. Look at the stocks and how fluctuating everything is. Look at, job security. Right? You think, yeah, I've got my job for life. And all of a sudden your business is closing. It's like, oh, you're not going to have a job anymore. Right? Like job security, all of these things. Wealth is so uncertain. Sports betting is now a thing, and it's like advertised everywhere. They advertise it like, oh, but warning, if you have an addiction, don't do this. But still, bet on sports and do all that stuff. But you know that there's upsets all the time. Put all your hope in this team, all your hope in this player. Oh, you're betting on every little thing. Like, did they pick their nose before they hiked the ball? Like, all these little things that you can bet on. It's so uncertain. You know what else is uncertain? Your life, your health. You have no idea what's going to come in the next diagnosis, the next doctor's visit. You have no idea the amount of money you could be spending on your health. It's so uncertain. It's don't put your hope in money. Don't put your hope in wealth. And Paul's just telling Timothy, like, command the people, don't put their hope in these things, in riches. It doesn't do it in the end. Instead, put your hope in God. You see, here's the reality. When we hope in our finances, we hoard out of fear. When we hope in our finances, we hoard out of fear. We start to hold on to things. We start to live closing our fists, right? We start to close our fists and say, this is mine. This is my money. I'm not going to share with other people. And so how does that play out in our lives? Well, maybe you save, which you should save, and you save and you save and save, but maybe you save so much and there's people around you who are hurting and you're like, well, I could help them, but I really have to save a little bit more. I got to save a little bit more. And you're just building up this wealth for yourself, all the while ignoring the needs of the poor around you. Or maybe you say, well, I know they talk about giving at my church and, but I just can't give because, I'm worried that something's going to happen, right? And someday when we pay off our debt, then I can give. Someday when we're content, then I can give. Someday when, X, Y, Z, whatever it is, then I can be generous. And we start to hoard our finances. Start to store our things in storage units. The storage unit industry rakes in $38 billion a year, and it houses 2.3 billion square feet. We could literally house the entire nation in storage units. Like, that's crazy. We have so much stuff we don't know what to do with, so just get a storage unit and store it in there. Just lock your stuff away. That's the world that we're living in. That's the America that we're living in. And so we start to hold on to our things because as Proverbs 23:5 says, money sprouts wings and flies away. And so what do you do when something flies away? You got to close your hand and grab it. Don't let it fly away. Hold on to it. Just hold it down. Oh, I'm not going to let go of this stuff. And in doing that, we're we're hoping in our finances and hoarding out of fear. Finances make a poor God. Instead, we are to hope in God. Put their hope in God who richly provides us with everything. How do you know God is a giver? God has given us so much. He is generous. He lavishes us with gifts. Every good gift comes from above. That God richly provides us with everything that is ours. Now, sometimes we read this verse and we're like, that's nice, but like, who's the one who's actually making the money in this family, right? Who's the one who's actually putting food on the table for my family? Two thumbs, this guy. This guy, I'm the one working my butt off for my family. I'm the one who's providing for my kids. I'm the one, we start to sound like the seagulls in Finding Nemo, mine, right? And we start to behave that way and we close our fists and say, mine. I'll tell you, God is so smart. He knows what we're thinking before we even think that. He said this in his word. He said it in Deuteronomy. He said, you may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth. That God has given you the brains that you have. He's given you the brawn and the strength that you have. He's given you, all that you have to produce wealth. And so rather than saying, mine, what if we said, God, it's yours. I trust you. I'm giving you, I'm putting my hope not in the wealth that I have, but in you, the giver of all good things. As it says, to put their hope in God who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. I want you to know God is not holding out on us. It's not like he's dangling a carrot in front of us like, oh, here, I've given you all this stuff. Now you can't enjoy it. You've got to just sell everything and get rid of it, and you can't enjoy anything. No, it says he's given us everything for our enjoyment, that we are to enjoy some of the things that he has given to us, which is a really hard concept for us to understand. So what do we do with this word enjoyment? I want you to dive with me a little bit deeper into the Greek language of this word. Because as you know, like you might know this, but the Bible was not originally written in English. It was written in the Old Testament in Hebrew and the New Testament in Greek. And so the Greek word for enjoyment is this word apolasis. Can we say that together? Apolasis. Apolasis, it's a compound word. There's two parts to it. There's apo and lasis. Apo means to separate from. It means to kind of separate yourself from. And lasis means to take hold of and to enjoy. And I was reading this, I'm like, that is like an oxymoron. Like to separate from, but then enjoy. To separate from, but then enjoy. And isn't that what we're to do with our wealth? Isn't that what we're to do with the things that God has given to us? That we emotionally separate ourselves from it, but we still take hold of it and we still enjoy it. And I picture this idea of like holding our hands open-handedly, opening them palms up to say, God, whatever falls onto my lap, whatever you have given to me, I'm going to enjoy, but I'm not going to cling to it. I'm not going to live a life where I'm just, hoarding things. I'm not just holding on to things, but I am, if it's taken from me, so be it. If it doesn't mean like, don't lock your things up. Like, we got some staff members that keep their doors unlocked. I'm like, guys, you got to lock your doors. There's expensive stuff, right? I probably shouldn't put that on the 5 o'clock news, but now they're going to lock their doors, right? But to enjoy things, like I have a laptop. And if someone else needed a laptop, would I be willing to be like, you know what? Here's my laptop. I don't know if I would, to be honest. But would I be willing to pitch in for them to get, but to hold things open-handedly. Say, God, this is mine. I'm going to enjoy it, but I'm going to share it with others. So if God has given you golf clubs, enjoy it and go play golf with your friends. I love this idea, this concept of holding things open-handedly. And Paul goes on to kind of show what this looks like. He says, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. Be willing to share. I love this. It says to do good, to be rich in good deeds. It's not just about kind of outsourcing service to other people. Like the richer you are, the more you just want to like outsource hard work. Just be like, I'm just going to pay people to do that. Pay people to take care of my lawn. Pay people to do, right? And yet he says, command them to do good. This isn't something you can just outsource to your PR people to be like, all right, would you do some good service for us so it looks good for me? No, he's saying, get your hands dirty. Get involved in serving others, in serving the poor. Command them to do good, to be rich. If you're going to be rich in good deeds and being generous and willing to share with others. I think the NIV kind of translates this poorly. It says willing to share. The ESV, another translation, says ready to share. See, I was thinking about this. Like, you could be willing to share. Like, oh yeah, I'm willing. If somebody said, I need some money, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm willing. But there's a difference between being willing and being ready. Being ready to share means I'm going to keep my eyes open to the needs of those around me. I am ready and eager to share, to be generous, to just lavish on people, to be kind and courteous and giving of myself. The word willing to share, this whole thing is really one word in the Greek called, it's the word koinonia, which is about community. See, isn't that the idea of giving? And generosity is this idea of community versus consumerism is about individualism. It's about me and mine and what I can buy from this world versus willing to share is this communal word. I'm going to share with others. He says, in this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves. See, when you and I are generous, when we are generous to those around us, we lay up treasure for ourselves as a firm foundation, not for this age, but for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. And so the question, would you rather have riches for 80 years, give or take? Or would you rather have riches for eternity? For eternity. That in this way, he's saying, in the way that you are generous, in the way that you are willing to share with those in need around you, that you are laying up treasure for yourself in heaven. It's actually the same word that Jesus used when he said, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. And isn't that the case of when we lay up and store up for ourselves treasures in this life, we start to have to put some more security on things because there's thieves that want to break in and steal. And so we got to put, extra security footage on it, extra locks on things. And we try to guard and protect everything that we have. Like every purchase that you make, how much do we think about like the upkeep of that thing, right? You buy like a new lawnmower. Well, now you got to take care of that lawnmower. You buy a new car. You got to take care of that car. You buy a power washer. You got to take care of that. Like all of the tools and things that you buy. You got to take care of them. Make sure moth and rust don't destroy. You put extra security on it. But Jesus is saying, instead, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust don't destroy, and where thieves don't break in and steal. Those are the things that can't be taken from you, because you're building a foundation for the coming age. So you may take hold of the life that is truly life, the content life, the abundant life, the life that is truly life. That's the content life that you and I are invited into. And we can take hold of that. The more we let go of the things of this world, the more we are holding on to the life that is to come. And so, here's the big point today. The path to contentment, it's paved by generosity. The path to contentment is paved by generosity. You cannot have contentment without generosity. You just can't. And some of us, we think, we flip this around like, someday I'll be generous when I'm content. When I have enough, then I will be generous. Someday, God, when I finally pay off that last student loan, well, then I can start giving. Someday when we don't have our credit card debt, then I can start being faithful in my tithes and offerings. Someday, God, when I start to finally lift out of this financial debt that I've been in. Someday when I'm making X amount of money, then I can be generous. I want you to know that you'll never be content. If that's your mindset, you will never experience true contentment, because contentment starts by having this attitude of holding our hands open-handedly and saying, God, everything belongs to you. Everything belongs to you. And I'm holding it, and God, if it's taken from me, so be it. But I know that you are the giver, you are the provider. You've given me the ability to produce wealth, and I pray I continue to produce wealth. And so as you give me more, Lord, that I'd be generous and willing to share with those around me. And in doing so, I experience greater contentment than when I close my hands and say, mine, mine, mine. So practically, how do we do this? How do we practice generosity? The Bible has a word for it. Sometimes it can be considered a swear word in church, right? It's this word, tithing. Tithing. Tithing is this practice that we find in the Old Testament, where it is giving to God the first 10% of your income. Tithing is biblically, it's the word that means a tenth. Maser is the word. It means to give a tenth, the first 10%. It's not giving 2% to God. It's not saying, God, I'm going to give you 6% of my income. I'm going to give you, I'm just going to throw a $20 at God, and just like as a tip. God, thanks for the lungs. Thanks for the air today, right? No, tithing is giving to God the first 10% of our income. And I say first because generally we treat it like it's the last. Like, okay, I'm going to do my budget. If you have a budget, I hope you do. You budget. It's like we get to the end of the month. Oh, we just don't have enough to give this month. We don't have enough to be generous. And so next month, we're going to pray. Hopefully we have enough. And, you give God the last whatever percentage is left. Versus choosing today to say, God, I'm going to give you 10%. Right when my paycheck comes, God, I'm giving you 10%. I'm going to live on 90% and trust that you're going to provide in that 90%. And then I don't have to worry about not having enough because I'm trusting in you. I'm not putting my hope in wealth. I'm not putting my hope in the 100% that's mine. I'm trusting in the God who's provided everything I need for my enjoyment. That he's good. He's not holding out on me. And so we invite you to tithe. And I invite you to do something that might seem weird, which is to actually automate your giving. To automate your giving. And you can scan the QR code and set this up online. The reason I say automate, sometimes we think like, well, I'll give when I feel like it, when God moves in my heart to do it. But when was the last time you felt like breathing? When was the last time you felt like your blood pumping through your body? Like these are automatic systems that God has put inside of us. And sometimes we devalue automation thinking like, well, that's a bad thing. I need to feel it. See, I feel it when I see that money come out of my bank account. I feel it. And I feel it. I'm like, oh boy, yep. All right, there it is. It's going, yep. I feel it. But it's an act of trust to say, God, I know I could use that money for something else, but I'm trusting in you. So I encourage you to automate your giving because there's nothing that will help you to depend on God for every single thing that he gives you than to tithe and to make that an automatic process in your life. And in doing that, I want to tell you about 3 different opportunities, generosity opportunities at our church. And before I go there, some of you are like, oh, great. This was the sermon I came to today where he's talking about giving. Just another church that just wants my money. Here, I'll say the same thing we said last week and something we say a lot is, I don't want anything from you. In fact, we don't want anything from you. God doesn't want anything from you. God wants something for you. And I want something for you because in choosing generosity and choosing to tithe the first 10% of your income, it's not about what we get from you. It's about what you are taking part in the content life, to choose obedience, to choose trust, to trust God and take him at his word. And so I want something for you. I want you to have that. And if this is not the church where you trust the leadership and you trust the financial decisions that we're making, then I want to hold you open-handedly and say, if you want to go to a church that you do trust someone, that you do trust the leadership, that is okay. I want you to go to somewhere where you can be fully invested all in. And if that's here, so be it. I'm glad that you're here. But here are some generosity opportunities we've got for you. The first is our general fund. This is where we ask that you would direct most of your tithe if you can, because this is what enables us to have the lights on, to do all these things, but it's for the next generation. It's to be a church focused on building up the next generation. A church that focus on baptizing people, that you, in giving to the general fund, you're giving to our staff salaries, you're helping us to pay for the operating expenses of our building. We also hold our finances open-handedly, and we tithe 15% of every dollar that's given here goes to our missions partners that we just give it to them. Because that's an act of obedience for us to tithe as a church. And so we invite you to give to the general fund. Another thing that this time of year we talk about is Christmas for 508. And we introduced it last week and invited you guys to give. And I just got to brag that you guys are, we already have a generous church, and I'm so grateful for you. I hope this sermon didn't come across as shame on you, because I am truly grateful for the congregation that we have. We put a need out there that we needed to raise $20,000, and I think we had $12,000 or something come in last week. This is our total of what we're trying to raise, $35,000, which would enable us to give presents to 350 kids who otherwise would wake up Christmas morning with nothing under the tree. And we have an opportunity to just be so generous in the way that we provide for these kids and these families. And so if you want to be a part of this, we're still looking to, right now we've raised $18,000, which enables us to do this for 180 kids. But you can do the math. We're looking for another $17,000 to help us meet that goal for 350 kids this Christmas. To be able to provide for these families who otherwise can't provide for their kids. And to just give them the love of Jesus. The greatest gift of all is Jesus under the tree, but this is the pathway to be able to share that good news with them. Last thing I want to tell you about is our Deacons Fund. Our Deacons Fund is a fund that 100% of it, I've got an envelope right here. Every time we do communion, we lay these out there on the chairs. Our Deacons Fund, 100% of it goes to this team of deacons whose responsibility is to steward it well and to give to those in our community and outside these walls of this church who are struggling financially. And they pray for the needs of those out there, but they also are providing financially. Whenever a need arises, if there's money in the funds, they are working on trying to meet those needs. It's an incredible, tangible way for us as a church to practice generosity, to say that we are a church that even if you don't come to this church, or even if maybe you're like thinking of coming to this church, like we want to be generous in who we are to the world around us. I want to tell you about a recent story that happened. And there was a couple who started coming to our church several months ago. And they had previously been struggling with drug addiction. And they got clean. Back in 2019, they got clean, they got baptized, they gave their lives to Jesus, and they had 3 kids. About 6 months ago, they relapsed. They fell back into their addiction, lost their kids who were taken from them. And this couple was struggling to make ends meet. They managed to get clean and go through a program to get clean again, but they lost their income. And they signed up for a small group here. We did Group Link back in September. They signed up and they didn't show up for the first couple of meetings. So their group leader reached out to them and said, hey, just wanted to check in. Hopefully everything's okay. And they said, yeah, we just don't have a car. We can't get to the meetings. So their group leader, it was that night, they were like, oh, we'll come get you. They drove to their house, picked them up, brought them over to their group. And this couple opened up to the small group and shared the struggles they were going through. They said, our electric's been off for a couple weeks now. We've been sitting in the dark in our apartment. We've got no money. We're barely making it. They were behind on rent, behind on all these bills. And so the small group prayed for them. And the small group leader brought that to the attention of the deacons. And the deacons were able to help them out, to pay for their electric bill and help them out in other ways. And this was a text message from the wife to the small group leader. It said this: our electricity is getting turned back on today, or Monday, the latest. Karen, one of our deacons, made a blank payment. I'm not going to put the amount in there, to National Grid for us. God is so good. I can't even believe it. I didn't think asking for help with that was even possible. That's way too much to ask from anyone. The church doesn't even know us yet, and they were willing to help us. That's amazing. She also gave us a $100 gas gift card. Thank you so much for bringing that to her. Seriously, thank you. This is the kind of church I'm so proud to be a part of. That we are living lives of generosity. That we are tangibly saying, God, we are holding our finances open-handedly. We are giving to those in need. We are helping those who have dug a pit, yes, for themselves, but we're helping them to get out of that. We're helping them to get back on their feet, to be able to get their kids back one day, to be able to get clean and to do all those things. And so we invite you to give, to be generous, to hold your finances open-handedly, because the path to contentment is paved by generosity. It's paved by generosity. And so I want to just invite us right now to just close our eyes. Wherever we are, maybe you're watching online or you're sitting here in this room. I want you to hold your hands on your lap, palms up, and kind of in this posture of surrender. God, this is how we want to live. But so often, God, we live with our fists closed. I want you right now to just close your fists and clench them tightly. Maybe you're digging your nails into your skin. Like, that is how we live, God. So often we worry about tomorrow, and you say, tomorrow's got enough worries of its own. We hoard our wealth and we hold on to the things that we think that we've earned for our families. Instead, God, you're inviting us to open our palms. Right now, would you open your hands? God, we want to live lives of obedience. We want contentment, God. We want peace. We want the peace that surpasses understanding, that whether we're in plenty or in want, God, we've learned the secret of being content, and it's a generous life, God. It's holding our lives open-handedly and just appreciating and celebrating what you have given us with a focus on how we can bless those around us. God, whether we've got plenty or whether we're in want and we're barely making it ourselves, God, would you open our eyes to see how we can use our time, our talents, and our treasures to lay a firm foundation for the coming age. And in doing so, God, that we would take hold of the life that is truly life, the abundant life that you invite us to, the content life. In Jesus' name, amen.